force of these people to do what they did.
He was a hero. He was a major hero.
Look at that. Flying man.
And this is arguably one of the most groundbreaking paintings in Norwegian art history.
Tell me why. I couldn't stay in there for more than 10 seconds, that's for sure. It's physically painful. Welcome everyone to another episode of Alastair's Travels here on Viking.TV. And I'm in Norway's capital city, Oslo, in the middle of a cold winter. And it's pretty chilly, but that's okay because I'm dressed for it. And I'm excited to show you some of what this city has to offer, whatever time of year you come and visit. So let's get into it. So Jan, here we are in the Vigeland Park in Oslo. It's an extraordinary place, very popular with our guests
It is.
that we bring to Oslo. Before we talk about the sculptures, can you just tell me a little bit about the man? If you met him today, what kind of impression would you have of him?
I think you would be overwhelmed by Gustav Vigeland. I think you must have been in those days also. He was an extraordinary human being. He must have had a very strong personality. He persuaded the city of Oslo to finance a project of the sculpture park with a lot of private sponsors also, but he managed to get the finances in for this project with a lot of help, allies and friends, art lovers, but still you don't do that if you're not a certain kind of personality.
So he's a very determined man.
Absolutely.
Perhaps not an easy man, a man with a temper. A man who is prepared to spend, how long? 40 years? 44 years?
40 years of his life, he had this 44 years of his life, he had this concept in his mind. Working in the park, say 30 years of his life, and they continued 12 years after he died in 1943. They continued working on the park after his sketches and models. So he worked on this idea of the park most of his life.
And what do you think what is he trying to communicate? What's the concept?
Well, it is life itself. There are 212 individual sculptures, but they form a unity which is life itself with all sides, all aspects of life, but also an idea of the cycle of life, where death is present in the park, but death is never an end. It leads to rebirth, or the cycle of life continues in the sculptures. So it is life in a realistic way, but certainly also in a philosophical, almost religious way.
And this central tower, is extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean,
isn't it?
I mean, again, is that the representation of the passage of life from birth to death?
Well, first of all, the practical side is that it is 17.3 meters high, and it is one piece.
One piece
of granite. And it had a weight of 220 tons in raw condition.
Yeah.
And there were three men, three workers, sculptors, that worked after a model of Gustav Vigeland's on this for 13 years. Three men, and they did nothing else for 13 years.
Isn't that incredible?
So I always think that we should all not just admire the art, but also the hard labor involved in realizing these ideas that Gustav Vigeland had.
Absolutely, yeah.
But the idea itself, or the column, the monolith, as the official title is, the idea is, if you look at it, you'll see you have dead bodies at the base, and mainly children at the top.
Okay, yeah.
So if you think about the circle of life, you now have you have dead bodies, you have death as the foundation of life, and out of that root, children are the fruit.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. A lot of the sculptures are of naked people, and in a lot of parts of the world, you just couldn't have a place like this, could you? It just wouldn't be acceptable.
Probably not.
But was that an issue?
It was an issue
when it was created.
Yeah, it was an issue. There were discussions about it. I mean, you have 212 sculptures, but you have 678 bodies. 4 of them wear clothes. The rest are naked, and it is a public park, open to the public, 24/7, no admission,
no age limit,
and fill it with new people.
Right.
Vigeland, he of course was asked about that, and he said, "Well, I'm not into pornography." He might have put it in another way, but he said that he was not into pornography. It's not about nudity, but about the naked human being that is timeless and universal. And if you take the clothes off these sculptures, he said, then you will end up having no context, no social background, no time, no place. This is human being, period. Full stop.
Flying man. So, Jan, here we are at the world-famous Holmenkollen ski jump, which is right here behind us. And could you tell me something a little bit about its history?
Well, the first Holmenkollen ski jump was constructed in 1892, but it has been renovated a number of times, and 5 times they have torn the old construction completely down and constructed a new one. And this is what happened here now in the last time in 2011. What we see, there's almost nothing of the old course left. So in 2011, this new Holmenkollen was finished.
This is one of the best ski jumps in the world, is that correct?
Well, of course, all Norwegians would say so. It's not where you perform the longest jumps, and as we see it, it's from 2011. So as such, it's not the oldest. But I presume that Holmenkollen is at least one of the oldest locations where ski jumping has been performed ever since 1892.
And ski jumping still happens regularly here?
Yeah, it does. We have the World Cup every year at Holmenkollen as an international competition, of course. Then there are national competitions, local competitions also. But it is used as a ski jump, yeah.
And we should point out that actually today and for the next few months they're doing some renovation work on the museum and the cafe. But Viking guests can come here on an optional excursion. What would they see? What would they experience?
Well, in addition to being at one of the icons of modern ski jumping, you would also see a piece of very beautiful modern architecture. Mm-hmm. But as you go up there, from even without visiting the ski museum and go all the way up to the tower, you will have a spectacular view of the city and the fjord. That's
true. I've been on a previous visit. I've been up to the top, and I had two impressions. One was, as you say, was the fantastic view just behind the hill over there that you get of the whole Oslo fjord. And the other impression was just how crazy you would have to be to get on two sticks of wood and come flying down there and land somewhere down there. I mean, we were just at the slightly smaller ski jump next door, because this one isn't ready for jumping yet. But even that one, I mean, it's an extraordinary sport, isn't it?
It is, and it's a slightly smaller, but you still have to be slightly crazy to do it, I think. It is a very special sport for somebody who got into the habit of doing that and enjoyed it. I don't understand why.
I don't understand either, but it's a big thing in Norway, because all the winter sports in Norway are very important for the Norwegian people.
They are, yeah.
And ski jumping included.
Absolutely. Although ski jumping is not a major sport where a lot of people perform it, you will find that there are tens of thousands of spectators here during competition, and when it's televised from other places in the world, it's a lot of Norwegians sit down and enjoy it. So it is. Anything has to do with winter sports, the Norwegians enjoy that.
That was amazing. What was your name?
Simon.
Simon.
Yeah.
And how long have you been doing this?
I started when I was about 9, 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you training for a competition, or? Well,
my main goal is the World Championships in Trondheim in 2025. But now I hope to make it to some COC competitions. It's like the level below the World Cup.
Okay, and just tell me a little about the technique. What makes for a really great jump?
Yeah, you need to have the balance in the in-run. So you need not to be too in the front or too in the back, but just the nice balance. Then you gotta maintain a lot of, as much speed as possible at the same time that you manage to make some power into the jump.
Right. And do you ever fall?
Yeah, I've fallen a couple of times. I had surgery in my knee in May, actually, last year. So I tore my MCL. And I broke my collarbone when I was 14. But that's it.
So you've been doing this for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And what's it like? How do you begin?
I know, I grew up not very far from Holmenkollen, so I always seen it. So, yeah, it's kind of spectacular.
But when you began, you start on a very tiny little baby
like
foot.
A hill that's 15, it's a 15-meter hill. So, and then you kind of build your way up.
Wow. And what is it? Can you try and just describe the feeling you have when you're coming down, and that moment where you take off and you're flying through the air? Yeah,
it's kind of nice. I don't know how to explain it to someone that doesn't do it, but yeah, it's kind of a special feeling when you just feel the skis kick it up at your body, and you feel the lift. So yeah. You're flying basically, so.
And you have that feeling of flying?
Yeah.
It must be amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and here we are in Fridtjof Nansen's house, which is a real privilege to be here. And he was known for many things, but one of the things he was most famous for were his expeditions. And one of those was on what was called the Fram expedition. Can you just tell me something about that expedition?
Yeah, the Fram expedition was the second expedition Fridtjof Nansen performed before, because he was at the Greenland, going cross-country skiing across Greenland in the late 1880s. And it was during that expedition that he heard and saw himself that there were some wreckage at the coast of Greenland that had its origin in a ship that has disappeared on the other side of the North Pole. Mm-hmm. So Nansen got the idea that there was a current leading across the North Pole, and he wanted to exploit that current to reach the North Pole. So he, with the help of the Scottish boat builder Colin Archer, he designed the vessel Fram, which has two special features, that the sides are 3 times reinforced, so it was a very strong boat. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, it has a round shape, so that Nansen and Archer knew that the boat would actually not be crushed by ice, but lifted by the ice. And then it was the intention of Nansen to let the ship freeze in ice and drift with the current across the North Pole. So he started out in Norway, July 1893, sailed slowly to the north coast of Russia. Slowly, because the boat was not a fast boat. It was constructed for standing in the ice, and the maximum speed was 6 knots. So it was a slow boat. But in September 1893, they started the journey in ice. The boat froze, Fram froze in the ice and didn't move by its own machine anymore, but slowly then drifted across the North Pole ice. Now, after a short while, Nansen realized that the current did not go across the North Pole as he expected and hoped, but as we know now, the current at the North Pole goes around the North Pole. So he knew that he was now not getting as close to the North Pole as expected. And a year and a half into this journey, he decided that it was now time to leave the ship and do the rest on foot, cross-country skiing. They had the equipment along for that, because they knew, of course, that it would not the journey in ice would not bring them directly to the North Pole. So they were planning for cross-country skiing already. But he and Hjalmar Johansen left the ship in March 1895 and wanted to go 420 kilometers to the North Pole.
So just 2 men?
Just 2 men, on their own. And with no contact, absolutely no contact with the ship. They had no means of calculating where the ship would be, so they knew that not only going to the North Pole, but also going back to safety in Norway would be on their own. They knew that in Franz Josef Land, just south of the area, they knew that there was an English expedition led by Frederick Jackson at the time. And their plans, their hopes, was to get to Franz Josef Land and get contact with the British expedition. But first, a rush for the North Pole, which was a slow progress compared to what was the plan, what was expected or hoped. So already after 3 weeks, they had to turn around in early April, because they knew that they had to be in Franz Josef Land before the Arctic darkness sets in. And then it was 5 months going south, cross-country.
5 months?
5 months. Sailing they had their sleighs that were then reconstructed into boats, so they sailed in open waters when that was possible. And in September 1895, they got to Franz Josef Land, constructed a cottage, and spent the winter there. And in that small cottage, they were in their sleeping bag, and they shared a sleeping bag between them to sort of exploit the body heat of one another.
The warmth.
Yeah. And they were there literally 5 months, 21 hours a day in that cottage, in that sleeping bag.
In darkness?
In at least semi-darkness. The midst of the winter would be complete darkness.
Good heavens.
Yeah.
And how did they eat? What did they eat?
Well, they had during the journey they shot ice bear. There are a lot of stories, dramatic stories about ice bears and seals. They fished, and so they had food, but probably not what you would expect on a Viking cruise.
So after 5 months, what happened?
Then they got up. Now it's March 1896, and they got out looking for the British expedition and found it, and were brought back to Norway by the British. Actually, on August 13th, 1896. I mentioned that date because that is, by coincidence, the exact same date that the boat, the polar vessel Fram, now leaves ice for the first time in 3 years. And a week later, the rest of the crew is also back in Norway, safe and sound.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And when they arrived back, the whole town, city came out to greet them.
Yeah, it was. There's no question about that. Nansen is one of the major heroes of Norway at that time. If you look at pictures showing the return of Fram and Nansen to Oslo, if you see the crowd gathering in Oslo, it is just about the same crowd that you had a few years later when King Håkon VII arrived as the first king of Norway in modern times. He was a hero. He was a major hero.
I mean, really, I'm just so amazed at the determination and the force of these people to do what they did, and with none of the communications that we have today.
No.
Setting out, really not knowing whether they would ever come back.
No, and let me just mention that the name of the vessel, Fram. Now, Fram in Norwegian means forward. And Nansen later said that because when they left the ship, they had no means of communication, there was no way of going back. So they burned all bridges behind them. But Nansen said, well, if you do that, if you burn your bridges behind you, you'll have to go forward. And that's where my destination is, my goal. So Fram means forward, because Nansen, he didn't know any backwards. There was no return. It was always forward, and therefore the name Fram.
Bente, tell me, where are we now?
We are now in the attic of the famous room that Nansen had as his studies. He was working here, and this room is left the way he left it, sort of when he died in 1930. So it's been here for many years, and. He was not supposed to be disturbed in his room. He had a phone, which we can see here. It went down to the kitchen, and no one was supposed to call him, but he can call down for some cookies and some tea.
Yes.
And he was sitting here working hours and hours and doing what he was best at, starting with his zoology,
yes,
with his microscope, as you can see here. This is his old microscope.
Right.
And he went over to the oceanography, do you call it that? With working with the sea and with all the water samples. He collected water samples from around the world. This water samples behind the table is from the Garda lake in Italy. So he went everywhere, not just up in the north and in the polar sea.
In a way, this was his little laboratory.
Yeah, it was actually, yeah.
So he'd sit here at his desk and he would carry out maybe scientific examinations of...
With the salt and with what kind of animals are living in the different areas of the sea levels, and This was what he was the best thing he loved. He loved to do that. That was, and that's when he also made the Nansen bottle, as we can see a prototype in the corner over there, behind the shelf. The bookshelf. We have one down in the museum room downstairs in the basement as well, and an original one. And he collected water samples from different depths. And on his table here, you can also see his snow goggles, which he used when he was walking skiing in over Greenland, and or when he was on Fram, and he was as you know he went off the boat Fram and was gone for about 9 months, hiding in a ice cave. And the snow goggles are very they're made of wood because they wouldn't get cold around his eyes, and they're very sort of a narrow sight because then he wouldn't get snow blind. So that's why he has made them himself. And
it's incredible how they managed to do so much with equipment that was so
yes, it is actually
so basic.
But as we could see over here, we have a sort of this one is it's a wax roll, and he was talking in this one, recording himself because he was writing a lot. So probably it was nice to have to record something. And all these are wax rolls with his voice on. Some of them we can still listen to,
really?
And some of them they've been here for many years. Some of them are at the National Library, so we can hear his voice.
Oh, how wonderful!
Yeah, it's wonderful actually. Mm.
I'd love to hear a recording.
Yeah,
of that. Yeah, that's amazing.
Of his voice, yeah.
So here he lies, Fridtjof Nansen, one of Norway's great heroes, in what's been, for me at least, a week of discovering great Norwegian heroes. I'm just curious, when you grow up in Norway, do you learn about this man? Is he somebody that is taught about at schools? Is he still very alive in the national memory?
Absolutely. He was a man of many activities, and at least the humanitarian, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Fridtjof Nansen, he is taught at school. And I would say the polar scientist is probably less known around most people, but certainly it is a story that is told and taught at school.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
I did it already this morning.
You did? I don't know how you do that.
I did it this morning, go slowly down, and I took the degrees. You know how many it is?
No.
Guess.
I don't know, 0?
2.
2. Oh my God.
Okay, so I think we should have to go in
I gotta go
twice.
quick, Lena. I gotta go quick before I get
And
cold.
then we go back again. I put it like this.
Oh my God. Oh.
Nei da, det snakker ikke så ille.
That's so cold. Oh my God.
It's so tight. Next time I will try. I'm gonna go.
I can see the no, I don't know how you do that. Let me shake your hand. Ice woman. The ice woman of Oslo. She put too much water. What? She put too much water. It's just. Oh my God. Oh my God.
is coming here. We're nearly getting him. But he has the food. Now you can eat.
Yeah, it's physically painful. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. I couldn't stay in there for more than 10 seconds, that's for sure. What a great view. Fantastic. It's a beautiful place to have a sauna, even if you do have to break the ice to get into the water. Lena, I don't know about you, but I feel amazing. I'm not cold at all.
No?
It was a little painful for me getting in the cold water. But
Yeah.
now I've come out, I feel fantastic.
Yeah.
All those endomorphines are starting to
Yeah,
move around
growing,
my
yeah.
brain. I'm starting to feel great. How about you? How are you feeling?
Well, for me, this is this is life. This is talking about time. You are very much in the moment.
Yeah.
I found this very amazing, and I'm
Yeah.
living in Oslo. I haven't tried this before, so this will be my new habit.
Fantastic.
Definitely. I cannot do it every day, but maybe I will do it once a month.
Yeah, that's
or
nice.
maybe every once a week. I'll get my kids to come.
And you know, it's nice to come with friends
Yeah,
and chat.
friends
have a
also
social,
to
make
chat.
a social
and-
thing out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Very, very, very nice.
In Finland, they
Yeah.
which is the kind of sauna capital of the world, they use saunas to have diplomatic meetings.
Oh yeah, I have heard that.
With ambassadors
Yeah,
meeting
yeah,
in
yeah,
the saunas
yeah,
and
of
stuff.
course, yeah.
Because once you take the clothes away,
Yeah.
everyone's equal.
Exactly, yeah.
And apparently it works. It works well.
Yeah, we have to go in again.
Yeah, let's do that again.
Yeah, of course, many times. I mean, we're here.
Wow. You see, now I'm starting to feel good.
Yeah, you see him?
Now I feel like a Viking god.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ready for
The Viking.
waffles.
The Viking.
Yeah,
The
all
only thing you need now. The only thing you need now is the warm Viking clothing. Viking!
Go Viking.
Go Viking! Go swimming! Go Viking! High five.
Mia.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you?
So Mia, this is your world. This is the conservation area of the Munch Museum.
Welcome to my world.
Thank you. Yeah,
And these
I'm
amazing
excited to be here.
facilities.
Thank you.
Well, this is part of Munch's work around the frieze you see in the aula at the University in Oslo. He made several sketches and he worked over many years, for 5 years approximately, finding the 11 different motifs. And we have so many sketches in our collection with different appearances, with different conditions, different techniques. And this artwork is actually going to Germany now. And usually we wouldn't send many of these monumental or semi-monumental paintings because they have quite challenging conditions. Like in this painting, you see there's a lot of losses, or like paint, and the preparatory layer, the white preparatory layer called the ground, has fallen off. And for this particular painting, and many of the artworks in the frieze, for the aula, they have this very coarse canvas, and it's exposed today because of losses, so it's sensitive to light. You shouldn't expose them with too much light, because it's almost like artworks on paper. They're very sensitive to light. You need low lux levels and not too many months a year with exposure. But maybe the biggest problem with this painting, like you see down here, there's so many losses, and it's very sensitive to vibrations when we send them on loan. But sometimes we make exceptions if we think that the paint layers are stable enough. What's common with many of Munch's later artworks after the 90s is you have a very matte appearance or surface. And this can be both, like in this painting, due to the technique. Maybe he used a plant-based binder, because when you make paint, you need the pigment, a powder, and then something to blend it with, so you can have a smooth, creamy texture when you paint. And sometimes you want something to flow a lot, and other times you just want dry, harsh brush strokes.
Right, yeah.
And here you have this very matte surface, and which is quite common for his art. But it's not just because of the technique and the materials he chose, but it's also the condition over the years. You have this kind of chalky surface on many of his paintings, and if you touch, and we can't do that, you would have this chalk on your fingers with the color of the pigment.
So I can see why vibrations would be a problem.
Exactly.
At what point do you stop conserving a painting? Is the idea to keep the paintings exactly as they were when Munch finished them, or do you accept that time will have an effect and there's nothing you can do about that?
Yeah. Well, definitely time will have an effect, even though we do all we can to break down the speed of degradation. But we want to preserve how the paintings were after Munch's death. So maybe he finished the painting in his 70s when he was young, or in the 90s during his golden age, or often considered the most important artworks. Or maybe there are paintings just from the year before he died. But particularly those that had some years in his studios, because he had several studios at his estate outside Oslo, at Egli. They were not a proper construction for living inside. They were just plain structures where moist and dust and, birds, anything could come in and out. And not snow, but probably dripping rain. And this had an effect on the condition of the artworks.
Right.
So we have, for instance, lots of artworks with bird droppings. And if we can prove that they are from his time, like there's been done research on it by, for instance, Millestein, on bird droppings in his artworks, then we wouldn't remove them, because we have photo documentation showing this was an exhibition with a bird dropping.
Right.
So it's part of his attitude, really. And probably this was not an effect he wanted, but that's artists. He was so productive.
Yeah.
We have approximately 1,200 paintings in our collection, and you can imagine all of those were stored at Egli. So you need a proper art storage if you want them to be protected really well. And at that time, artists, I don't think many artists do that.
You know, Mia, what's fantastic is when you look this closely at a painting, you just see how much is going on. I mean, how the different colors. I mean, it's so full of color and
you see here
brush
how it's running,
I
which is diluted paint. And Munch.
Oh, here, like this.
You see it's running like water paint, but it's probably oil-based paint and diluted in turpentine. And you see that in many of his paintings. And here he used a lot of impasto. Like here, we call it impasto when it has this high relief, a lot of thick paint. But here you can see he used like a spatula and some brushes and even fingers in some of his paintings. He kind of modeled.
Wow.
And he scratched a bit. It looks like we have some scratch marks here, probably from the brush. And so you have a big variety in the technique in one and the same painting.
It's almost many paintings within one painting.
Yeah.
I mean, just this would be
a
painting on its own, and this would almost be another abstract.
And this is also very abstract, like you say, like cobblestones or
No, it's a real privilege to see paintings this close up. It's absolutely wonderful. So Mia, Viking guests can come into this room, into this conservation area.
Yeah.
And what's
nice for us, and I hope it's nice for them. We mount our cameras to the microscope so they can see in detail what we are working on. And then we would select a painting, a particular painting that's interesting to talk about. And they can ask questions. What are these phenomena? Why do you do this? And what's your background?
But just to be clear, normally people who come to the Munch Museum don't come into this area.
No, so this is
privileged access.
Can we call it VIP zone?
Let's call it VIP zone.
Yeah.
I like that.
So this is the Infinite exhibition. It's the biggest exhibition we have of Munch's works on show. And it also shows the biggest scope of his artistry because he explored so many different mediums. A lot of it he's not very well known for, like his experiments with sculpture. The museum has the biggest collection of Munch works in the entire world. It's actually 2/3 of his entire life's production. But what I find the most fascinating is that this was Munch's private collection, because he gifted everything he owned of art to the municipality of Oslo in his last will and testament. So we have some of his most famous works, but also a lot of works that had never been exhibited before this museum opened.
And how many paintings do you have altogether in the museum?
Well, the total of works is reaching 27,000 works of art.
27,000
Yes,
works.
so it's a lot of work to go through.
He was incredibly prolific, wasn't he, Munch?
Yes, I think productive is a good way to describe him. And he was also very obsessive. He would make many, many versions of his works.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, this is the vampire.
Yes, this is also a painting that we have many different renditions of in oil painting, as well as several different graphic prints. And it really tells us something about the time, the gender relations, the fight for women's rights, and this bohemian woman that poets and artists found so scary because they were so free and using their sensuality in new ways. Perhaps that's where the myth of the vampire comes from. It's this classic femme fatale symbol.
Do you think this is Munch himself? Yeah.
It could be. I mean, in a way, he was afraid of love and relationships.
Yeah.
He came from a very conservative background, and even though he experimented with free love, I think he held a lot of guilt and shame around it from his early youth. We could go inside here, where we have dedicated an entire room to the motif of death, because this was such an important motif for Munch.
Ah, beautiful. Yeah.
Yes. Munch was struck by tragedy since he was a child. He lost his mother when he was only 5 years old, and he's studying the effect that death had in our lives and how it can connect to love and new life throughout his whole career. That might have been the inspiration to this painting. He lost his sister as well when she was only 15 and Munch was only 14. And this is arguably one of the most groundbreaking paintings in Norwegian art history.
Tell me why.
Well, if you see it from the context when it was first made in 1886, it was shown in the annual state exhibition. Norway was still kind of disconnected from the European art scene, where things were moving forward. And here, it was still realism and romanticism, and painters were trying to capture the nuances in landscapes and subjects as closely and photographically as possible, following academic tradition all the way back from the Renaissance. But Munch, here comes this 20-year-old kid showing this painting that breaks all the rules, because he was so much more focused in capturing the emotional aspect of it. Even though death and disease was widespread in the arts, Munch did it in a way that really disturbed the viewers. And people, I mean, the critics were accusing him of not being able to paint at all. They felt that this looked almost like a sketch. And you can see why. I mean, there's this conscious protest against the perfection in the way that he paints the objects and the details in the body. But still you can see so much emotion in the details of the face, the disease that she's struck by, and the way she looks out at this light that might be calling her to something more eternal.
Because this is Munch's sister.
Yes.
And she died of tuberculosis.
She was only 15 and Munch was 14, and it was an event that marked him for the rest of his life because they were so close. And his aunt, who had taken care of his young sister and his whole all of his siblings after his mother's death, she's kind of surrendering to the fact that she can't do anything else to help her. The ambience, it's really gruesome, and I think Munch was not afraid of creating discomfort in the viewer. He did not try to make it look beautiful or perfect.
No.
He was aware that these kind of events were traumatizing, and this was his way of processing through this grief and this tragedy. And that's perhaps why it's so beautiful, this tenderness between the two. You can't almost not tell who is comforting who.
Yeah, it's almost as if she is the sick one and she's comforting her. Yeah. No, it's the most beautiful painting.
This building was drawn up by the Spanish architecture firm Estudio Herreros, and they really invented this concept of the vertical museum, which makes it a journey all the way upwards, and you're constantly meeting the landscape of the city of Oslo.
Mm-hmm.
The bend in the building itself is showing reverence to the city that was such a vital part in shaping Munch's artistry as a young man.
I didn't know that. That explains. Okay. The building is paying homage to the city.
Yeah, that's.
I like
at
that.
least what the architects say.
That's nice. Those architects.
Yeah.
Hi. Whoa.
Welcome to the monumental room.
Wow, that's amazing. Look at that. Just the size of those paintings. They're huge.
We had to create this room especially only to show these massive scale canvases. And they were so hard to transport because you can't roll up this kind of canvas anymore. So we had to open a slit in the wall, and they were lifted by crane over the fjord and placed directly into this room.
It's just an explosion of light, isn't it?
Yes, it's one of his most awe-inspiring works, for sure. And it really reflects just how light in itself is an expression of energy and vitalism and life force.
You really feel it. Oh, I do, for sure.
It's a magical moment.
It's a very special moment. I mean, what we're looking at is probably one of the most recognizable paintings in the world, I'd say, up there with the Mona Lisa.
Up there.
Yeah.
And I don't think Munch would have suspected that it would become this while he was still alive.
No, I think he'd be amazed to see this.
Yes, this was this general anxiety that Munch was really able to capture in this painting, and it's only grown in relatability as the years have passed. I mean, each time the world goes through some kind of big crisis, we seem to return to this painting, and it's almost become synonymous for fear and shock itself.
Yeah.
But perhaps the reason why it was so radical was that it seems to capture this psychological state within. I mean, Munch felt this overwhelming fear and anxiety that he felt that no one was able to relate to. He describes these two friends walking ahead and feeling this infinite scream through nature. So the figure itself is not screaming. It's nature that's bending and warping as our own mind state is causing everything to seem disturbed.
I think that's the biggest misunderstanding about this painting. It's not the figure that's screaming.
Yeah.
It's the nature.
It's the nature,
Yeah.
and we're reacting to it. It's a reflection of our own inner states that no one else can understand. I think it's still as relevant as it ever was.
Yeah, which is why it's a great painting.
And that's why we take such great care of it as well.
Yeah. So this is the exact spot where Munch heard the scream of nature and painted one of the world's most famous paintings, The Scream.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's right.
And this would have been a very different view in those days.
Yes, it would. The vegetation, the urbanization, of course, different. But one more important thing is that, Munch said that others paint what they see, I paint what I saw. And what Munch did was not realistic painting. So it's not an authentic photographic image that he does. This was all in his head.
So what we have to imagine is, we don't have it today, the sun is setting over to our left, but there was this incredible sunset with great, striking, strong colours. And that for Munch was the scream of nature. Yeah. Which is what this figure here is hearing. Yeah. And his two friends would have been standing just along a little bit further along from this railing. Yeah. It's quite something to come here, really, to this spot.